Hey guys, I hope you're having a wonderful day. I decided to go ahead and record our lectures since, we're not going to be together physically. And I know just kind of scrolling through a PowerPoint can be incredibly boring. That being said, I have provided the PowerPoints for you. You also have the ebook. I did not assign it, but obviously that is a good resource, and hopefully you have your book at home, which is another great resource. So I'm going to record this by section, so there will be one titled 20.1, one titled 20.2, and one titled 20.3. I highly suggest that after you watch 20.1, that you go and you do the 20.1 content on BPS Pearson New app, and then that you also take the 20.1 quiz. At the very end of everything, I do have a unit test in there for you. It is for this entire unit, so please, please, please make sure that you are ready before you begin that. It is open book, open note, so please take advantage of that and do your very, very best, okay? All right, so let's get started. All right, so this first section is about fossils. So when we talk about fossils, these are going to be what's left behind from extinct species. Okay, so species that have died out, like dinosaurs, are the most classic fossil. They can be large and perfectly preserved, so we could find an entire animal. They could also be as small as bacteria, plants, pollen grains. If you remember the David Attenborough documentary we watched a few weeks ago, he was showing some fossils of plants and small fish and shrimp. And he also showed the fossil of Archaeopteryx, right? So many fossils are just bits of an organism. So that would be teeth, pieces of jawbone, bits of a leaf. And then sometimes we don't even get pieces of the organism, but we'll see what's left as evidence of them existing. So examples being footprints, burrows, tracks, or droppings. Dinosaur droppings are something that we find often. Sorry, that was my phone. Last but not least, many fossils are preserved in sedimentary rocks. Some are preserved in other ways, like amber, for example. If you've seen Jurassic Park, obviously you're familiar with the mosquito preserved in amber, and they were able to extract the DNA from that. Hopefully we'll be back for the end of the year, and you'll get to watch Jurassic Park with me. All right, so how are fossils formed? So most of them are going to be formed in sedimentary rock. This is where an animal is going to die, it's going to sink to the bottom, and then water is going to carry small rock particles to lakes and seas, and those small rock particles are going to fall onto the organism and kind of pack around it. And over millions of years, obviously, those sedimentary particles compact a little bit, and they become rock, okay, sedimentary rock. And that leaves behind this impression of the organism. So here you can see dead organisms are buried, and then the preserved remains may later be discovered and studied. So what can a fossil reveal? So if we look at this fossil, there's a couple things immediately that we see. Okay, first and foremost, we can see there are bones. Okay, we can see that this organism had fins. All right, and anyone can look at this and probably say, okay, this fossil was a fish. So if we look at it a little further, we can count the fins, we can look at the fin characteristics and try and figure out which modern day fish that this fish would have been closest related to. Now, when we look at fossils, we can do what's called relative dating. That's one of the two types of dating we have. We've got relative and carbon, or radiometric, because it doesn't necessarily have to be carbon. But relative dating is looking at the position in soil. So things found higher up in the soil are going to be newer, and things found lower are going to be older, right? So looking at this, we can see that we tend to see the same patterns over and over again. So for example, this is shell A, it's found above B, above C, above D, above F, okay? Now if we look here, this is A. Now we don't have a B here, but we do have a C, okay, and we do have a D. We're seeing that same pattern. The only way that this would change would be if there was some kind of ground disturbance. So for example, a volcano, earthquake, construction, things like that. that redistribute the soil and rearrange it. Radiometric dating is our other type of dating, okay, and this is where we're looking at the radioactive decay of an isotope. So this one in particular is showing potassium-40. A lot of times you'll hear about carbon dating, which is looking at the radioactive decay of carbon. But what we're looking at is the fraction of whatever that isotope is that is left. So if it started out with 100%, right, at, for example, about 1 billion years, we're looking at about a little more than a half, okay? At 2.5 billion years, we're a little under a quarter, and so on and so forth. So by looking at the amount of this, for example, potassium-40, we can kind of determine how old this fossil is because we know how potassium-40 decays. And we do the same thing with carbon. So if you hear about carbon dating, it's the same process. Geologic timescale, I can tell you right now, I will not require you to know this. Your EOC that you're not going to be taking anymore also does not require you to know it. So we're going to skip past this because it's a lot for you to remember. If you are interested, these are the ones people talk about more than anything, the Cretaceous, Jurassic, Triassic, because that's where dinosaurs were, and those make up the Mesozoic. But each of these were different and had some very interesting things going on. All right, now if we look at geologic time as a clock, I think this is kind of a more useful diagram, or more useful information. So the Precambrian is the pink, and you can see on our geologic clock, which makes the entire history of the Earth into 24 hours, that takes up essentially from midnight to 9 p.m. So that leaves us essentially with 3 hours left, right? Paleozoic takes about an hour and a half of what's left. Mesozoic takes about an hour, and Cenozoic, which is where we're at right now, is a little less than 30 minutes. So we can see how that distribution is, that most of this time and most of this time that we've spent has been in Precambrian. And this is kind of showing you what happened, okay, and how quickly this explosion of life happened on Earth. So we have formation of Earth, 5:30 a.m. have the first living cells, 8 a.m. photosynthesis, okay, so a little past noon, we had eukaryotic cells, which remember we are made of eukaryotic cells. Just before 6 p.m., we have multicellular animals, and it wasn't even until 9 p.m. that we have chordates, which are animals with a spinal cord, like you and me and dinosaurs and your dog and anything else with a spinal cord, right? So this has been a big explosion of life. All right, so life on a changing planet. This is showing continental drift, right? We know that the planet or the continents all kind of started out together on our planet, it's often referred to as Pangea, and that over time those continents shifted and they did change a little bit over time, right? And that leads us to present day. So we can see how things were connected and how things touched and how that it may have kind of influenced what organisms live on the different continents. So effects on life. Changes in climate, geologic forces, and biological forces have had effects on life. So here is an example. It's showing you this mountain in the middle of a desert. And if you look very closely, you can see that there are fossils of starfish. Now, obviously, starfish don't live in a desert. So this kind of implies that at one point this area was underwater, okay? And we can see that by the starfish fossils. Here's an example of a modern day relative of these ancient starfish. Okay. All right, and we're going to stop there. I will pick up with the next recording. Go ahead and go do the content for 20.1 and take the quiz. And I will talk to you in a little bit. Have a good night. Bye.